All right, I thought of a cool idea because I get a lot of questions about like my analog gear, and I decided it'd be cool if I just told you guys like buy or don't buy, and it'd be cool if I could get sponsored by companies to send me their stuff so I can tell everybody to buy or not buy it. But also, just to give recommendations, man. And look, this is not for like pro studios. You know, this is for the home studio guys, just the regular guys like me who are just engineering and mastering, and like they take their music serious enough to invest into this stuff, especially when we're talking analog gear. So I'm not gonna be like, oh, you can get this out of a plugin, because in all honesty, you can get anything out of a plugin and work completely in the box. You don't need analog gear. However, I would recommend at least one piece, but we'll get to that. So if you're thinking about analog gear and some of these pieces have been in your Sweetwater box for a while, maybe I can convince you to or not to get it. Yeah, let's go. So here's my studio. A lot of stuff, a lot of things to cover. Let's get to it. We'll start with a little sidecar. All right, first up, the Audioscape LA2A. This thing is great. Don't get me wrong, it's amazing. We all know what an LA2A does. It's a classic. Especially the one from Audioscape. I think it's the best like reinvention of the, you know, classic one from, you know, Yuri, or not Yuri, but Universal Audio, whatever, dude, Teletronics, sorry. Would I recommend to buy? No, I would not. I think the plugin is really close to it. The only reason I really have this is because I got a killer deal for it, and you know, I pretty much swapped mixing an entire album for this. So shout out to my boy Morgan. Great dude. But man, yeah, I would say no. Next is the Warm Audio 1B, or the CO1B essentially. I get a lot of questions about this because there's CO1Bs everywhere these days. It's super common in vocal chains, man. And people ask me about this one because it's definitely, you know, like $3,000 or $4,000 cheaper than the Lincraft one. Buy. Warm Audio, this is probably hands down their best piece of gear that they've come out with. This thing, like, I could never justify buying a legit CO1B because this sounds so good. I use it on everything. Anything that goes through this sounds amazing. It is $1,100, so a little more on the expensive side for just like someone starting a studio. But if you got the budget, man, I would recommend this as far as analog gear. Moving down, this is the Universal Audio 4710D. Now, this thing, I got this because I'm a drummer, I have a drum set, and I wanted great mic pre's to kind of fill in all the microphones you need. But also, the cool thing about this is it extends your I/O with like an Apollo interface, or any other interface for that matter, to an additional 8 channels of ADAT, which I kind of need a little more I/O, but I also needed the 4 mic pre's. But here's the other thing about it. There's a built-in 1176, and it has the blending knob for a transistor to a tube. So all the functionality that comes with this thing, I would say an absolute buy. Now, this is 4 Twinfinities. You might not need 4, but if we're just talking about 1 Twinfinity, which are pretty affordable, yeah, absolute buy. Now, the classic DBX 160s, man. Look, the only thing you're gonna use this for is kick and snare. Super affordable. I got both of these for like, I think $250, man. Great. Especially if you're into like music production and you really want your kicks and snares to hit, this is the way to go. Just run them through this. Now, a lot of these are really old, so you might need to replace the parts, so be careful about that. But yeah, man, I'd say buy. Over to my favorite piece of gear in my entire studio. This is the West Audio NG Bus Comp. And it's a phenomenal compressor. It's definitely like an innovator because you can utilize this with a plugin. West Audio is a great company. They make awesome stuff. I got this for mastering. This is a VCA compressor. It's similar to like a G-Bus, but with way more functionality and character to it. You know, dual mono, stereo, mid-side. You have this like harmonic distortion blending knob, and like it just sounds incredible. However, it is fairly expensive, so I would not recommend as a buy. If you got the money, sure, but this wouldn't be my first choice if I'm going into analog gear, so I can't say it's a buy. Okay, the SSL Fusion. This is the piece of gear that I was saying I would recommend be a home studio standard. Absolute buy for sure. You could even get away with not buying a mic pre and just running your vocals through this. I do it all the time for my vocal chain, if not almost 100% of the time. This thing has so much functionality and character in it. You get the classic SSL sound. You have all these different things that you can use, from a vintage drive with tubes, EQ, essentially a de-esser, stereo imaging. You have transformers, and you can insert other hardware units into it. And if they're stereo like this and don't have mid-side, you can give it mid-side functionality. An amazing piece of gear. It's definitely becoming a little more affordable. I think you can get them used now for like $1,500 I've seen on Reverb. Can't recommend this enough. Absolute buy. Okay, the Apollo interfaces. This is specifically an X8P for 8 preamps. Again, I had a drum set, so like this kind of made sense. We do podcasts, so I need a lot of IO, specifically for mic pre's, but also just for all the gear that I got. This thing, look, this is kind of tricky because for some reason Apollos get bad reps for their converters. I don't know what people are talking about. They're phenomenal, man. The only difference is when you get to the X16, and that one I wouldn't recommend for a home studio because it's mainly made for just a bunch of analog gear, and its converter is slightly better. But like the majority or all the other Apollos, they have the same converters and they're great, dude. Most converters are it's so close that you really can't tell the difference. They're just, I mean, it's slightly different. Apollo interfaces, absolute buy. You get the UAD plugins, they sound great. Even the X Twin, like it could dual as a monitor controller as well. Yeah, buy. Now, speaking of monitor controller, the Audient Nero monitor controller. I've had this thing for a couple years now, and it is possibly the most used item in my studio, and people don't really think about how much they use a monitor controller. Then again, it only matters if you have multiple monitoring systems, but if you do, this is like almost a must, and I am always flipping through and just utilizing, and this knob is the most touched thing in the studio next to my mouse, right? This has a lot of functionality for the price range. I think it's like $400. Dude, I can't recommend this thing enough. Absolute buy. But again, there's other monitor controllers that are cheaper, so you might not need all this, but if you have multiple monitoring systems, which most of you probably will, yeah, grab one. Moving over to the big boys over here, dude. Let's start with this new Carnaby HE2 from Cranbourne Audio. I've had this for like a day now. It sounds crazy, dude. I've never heard anything like this. It is essentially a harmonic EQ saturator. I won't even want to call it an EQ. It's mainly just a saturator with a bunch of bands on it. Sounds crazy cool. However, I would not buy, right? Would not recommend, at least. Obviously, I bought it, so I'm not trying to sound too hypocritical here with this stuff, but this thing is not like your first go-to unit that you're gonna need. There's definitely other ways that you can get that. You know, you run stuff through enough of this, like if you run it through this vintage drive, you're going to get a bit of that saturation with the SSL. But for me specifically, which I'm not trying to talk about why I have things so much, but I wanted it for like that saturation analog feel for the mastering chain. But yeah, I can't say it's a buy. The Elysia X filter. I actually got this while I was waiting for this to come in because I wanted a analog EQ for a session I was doing, and I just wanted to play around with one. And this thing sounds freaking cool, man. Especially this like matte or this like passive massage. Like the high end on this sounds, it's definitely the best I've ever heard in any unit. I mean, it's just a standard EQ. Would I recommend buying it? No, I would not. But if you're gonna get a nice EQ, then I would say, yeah. If you're gonna get an EQ in the analog world, I would get this one. But it's hard to say. I'm on the fence about this. I'm just gonna say that. I'm on the fence. So I really don't have a solid answer for this one, but it does sound great. The SPL Vitalizer MK3. I did a big video on this one for SPL, and you can go check that out on YouTube. But you know, when it comes to home recording studio stuff like analog gear, I would really focus on mix bus and like master processing. So you get the most functionality with things. You can run stems through this and it just makes them sound incredible. I mean, there's a lot of functionality with this. It is really complex to use though. You can easily overcook a signal, and it's like, I'm still trying to figure out like how to do this because there's little small sweet spots on this piece of gear. I wouldn't say it's a beginner piece of gear. So for that, it's like, if you know what you're doing, like maybe you've worked in a studio for a while and you're building your home studio, then I would say buy. But if you're new to this and you're just starting out and but you want analog gear, I would say don't buy. But again, it's amazing for mix bus processing and really brings life to your mixes. I use it all the time on almost everything I do. I use all my gear, to be honest, but like this one really just adds that like icing on the top. So buy if you're experienced, don't buy if you're new. With monitors now, Avalon Mix Cubes. These are like so freaking cool, man. I mean, I just like the way they look. I love the cherry red. It looks like a little Corvette, dude. But these things are awesome, man. And you might not need them in stereo, but at least get one in mono for like referencing your mixes, kind of like an NS10 type thing. Great asset to have in a studio. Absolute buy. And lastly, my Ex Machina monitors. Look, monitors are kind of complex to figure out which ones to get. If you're just going to get a home studio, man, I would say don't buy just because of the price of these things. I got super lucky on a crazy deal with these, but they are definitely far out of most people's price ranges. There's other options that like sound incredible that are like a quarter of the price, you know, like Kali speakers sound great, dude. Sometimes I listen to cheaper speakers and I kind of have like a little buyer's remorse with this, but these are hands down some of the best speakers that I've ever listened to, and I could not be more grateful that I even get to have these. So yeah, but again, because of the price of them, absolute no buy. Microphones. I got a lot of microphones, man. But this one in particular, the Townsend Labs, absolute must have, hands down. Every home studio should have this. It is a buy. It should be the microphone you go to because you can emulate so many others and they sound great. Like I have the Warm Audio 87 and I've, compared it to the 87 replication that this does, and it's like pretty freaking close, man. I use a 251 emulation all the time. Like this thing is amazing. And even if you don't use an emulation, you just have it by itself, it sounds phenomenal. I got mine with the deal. It came with the Apollo, so I didn't have to pay the $1,100, but like these things are awesome. Buy. And like I have other microphones, and if you want to go cheaper, my recommendation, the Aston Spirit microphones. These are probably the most underrated mics on the market. They sound great on vocals, but they really shine for overhead mics on a drum set. That's why I have two. These things are freaking awesome, and they're built like a tank. Like these could probably survive a nuclear blast, dude. These are probably some of my favorite microphones. Absolute buy if you're thinking about getting an affordable mic. Over an SM7B, yes. Thinking about going for a tube mic, here's another affordable one that I would recommend. Hold on, let me get this in focus. I can't do it. Here we go. This thing is pretty dope, dude. This was used for Taylor Swift's 1989 album. This is a CV12 with the Black Lion mod. Do you need a tube mic? If all you have is an interface, then absolute buy. But if you're gonna have some other hardware gear, like you get this Warm Audio 1B, it already has a tube in it, then I would say don't buy. But microphones are tricky, man. It's kind of all up to you. That's why I really don't want to go too deep in the mic thing. But, shoot a preference on that. Something else you should take into consideration are all the cabling that you're going to need as far as like pricing and everything. I'm not too picky on cables. I just don't like the ones from like Guitar Center. I forget what they're called right now on top of my head. But that's it, man. So, hopefully you guys like this, and if any companies are watching this, like please send me some gear so I can say buy or don't buy. I don't know. Yep, cool.